guys. Tonight we begin with the remarkable lives and incredible resilience of medieval villagers. The everyday survivors who, despite the odds, made it through some of the most suspiciously smelly centuries in human history. Forget castles and chivalry. This is the age of grime, gossip, and do not trust the bath. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's talk about the dirt. Not metaphorical dirt. Not scandalous social dagger between the ribs gossip. We'll get to that later. I mean literal, caked in, lived with, unapologetically human to dirty. In your tiny medieval hamlet, where pigs roam freely, roofs drip, and chamber pots are rarely emptied with urgency, filth isn't a flaw. It's a feature, it's insulation, camouflage, and in its own strange way, a form of health insurance. Because water? Water is risky. No one trusts it. Not the way you think they should. Sure, people drink ale from breakfast to bedtime, but even your neighbour's goat knows better than to lap from the town pond in summer. That pond gave 3 people the swelling last July. Only one of them's still around, and she doesn't blink right anymore. And bathing? Oh, you sweet summer soul. Bathing is deeply suspicious. See, once upon a time, not even that long ago, people loved baths. The Romans built entire marble complexes around soaking, steaming, and scraping. Medieval Europe inherited those ideas, and for a while bathhouses were a hit. Cities like Paris and London had dozens. They even had snacks. But then the whispers started. Whispers about steam opening the skin, about heat weakening the soul, about naked bodies letting the bad air in. By the 14th century, bathing wasn't just frowned upon, it was actively blamed for some of the worst diseases to ever hit Europe. Here's a fun and entirely horrifying historical truth. During the Black Death, many people believed that hot water and open pores allowed plague vapors to seep in. So naturally, they did what any rational person would do. They stopped washing altogether. In fact, it became common medical advice to seal the skin with layers of grime, oil, and tightly woven clothing. Dirt became armor. Sweat was a shield. One French physician in 1349 advised his patients not to bathe for at least a month after the last recorded plague death in their parish. Others took it further. One Benedictine prior wrote that people should avoid both bathing and excessive laughter, as both were known to weaken the body's defences, especially the laughter, apparently. So you wake up surrounded by wood smoke and the faint scent of last week's stew. Your feet are crusted in something earthy, uncertain in origin, definitely textured. You stretch, cough once, because everyone coughs, and glance at the single basin in the corner of the room. It's dusty, not from neglect, but from respect. Because to clean your body is to tempt fate. To remove that precious outer coating of skin grease and barn dust might be seen as arrogant. God gave you that crust for a reason. And it's not just about fear. Bathing, especially frequent bathing, has begun to carry other associations. Scandalous ones, moral ones, the kind that travel faster than rats in the alley. In many villages, a clean person is either dangerously naive, foreign, or a sex worker. sometimes all three. A woman who smells like lavender and has wet hair is immediately considered suspicious. Not just because she's clean, but because people want to know where, with whom, and what she paid for the tub. In one recorded case from Cologne, a merchant's wife was publicly shamed after being seen with washed hands twice in one day. Twice. The priest mentioned her in a sermon titled, "The flesh is weak, but the skin must remain unpierced." To this day, no one knows what that means. You look down at your fingernails. There's something dark and possibly moving under one. You wipe it on your tunic. No one notices. No one cares. Because here, in your world, bathing isn't healthy. It's provocative. And dirt? Dirt means you belong. There's a smell in the village that you can't quite name. It's not rotting. Not entirely. And it's not exactly unpleasant either. It's just ever-present. Like warm wool left in a cellar too long. Like someone made a soup out of people and patience and let it simmer for a few centuries. You step outside and it wraps around you like a familiar cloak. No one seems to notice it. That's the strangest part. The smith's apprentice has a smear of soot from nose to neck. The baker's wife has flour in her hair and something darker under her nails. Children run barefoot through puddles of questionable origin, squealing with joy. And not a single villager, not one, has bathed in recent memory. This is by design. You'd think, given the availability of rivers, streams and rain, that someone might at least splash their face now and then. But here's the thing. Cleanliness isn't trustworthy. In fact, it raises questions. Why would someone go to such lengths? What are they hiding? A rash? A boil? A visit to a brothel? Maybe all three. It's better, safer, to look like you belong in the dirt. Take old Henrik, the tanner. His skin looks like a raisin left on a forge, and he smells of leather, urine, and whatever's worse than urine. But no one questions him. He's normal. His boots are filthy. His tools are crusted. His breath could drop a crow from a tree. And yet he is respected. Now contrast that with poor Ida. Young, clean, hairbrushed, hands soft. A bit of perfume dabbed behind the ears, rose water and myrtle imported by her uncle from somewhere southern. She was lovely, until she wasn't. 3 weeks after her arrival, people began whispering that she never stained her apron, that her linens dried too fast, that her nails were shaped on purpose. When a pig went missing, Ida was blamed. When the priest's dog barked for 3 nights in a row, Ida was blamed. And when a local boy developed a rash, well, Ida had taken a bath the day before. Coincidence? They thought not. She left soon after, or was made to leave. No one really says. This isn't just petty village drama, it's cultural memory, deep-rooted suspicion. You see, in medieval thought, cleanliness had once been a public virtue. Cities in the 12th century had bathhouses, shared spaces where men and women, yes, sometimes together, would scrub, steam and socialize. They were seen as good for health, hygiene and the soul. But by the 14th and 15th centuries, especially after the plague, things shifted. Bathhouses were associated with illness, and then with immorality. Many bathhouses doubled as brothels. The word stew didn't just mean soup. It referred to bathhouses where more than your back got scrubbed. Laws were passed, clergy preached, cities closed them down one by one. And with that, the idea of communal bathing, transformed from therapeutic to theatrical sin. One chronicler in London described them as halls of steam and vice. Another simply called them hotbeds of Satan's own perfume. So now, in your little village, scrubbing your armpits is seen as mildly rebellious behaviour. Instead, you wash with cloth and vinegar. Maybe a dusting of crushed lavender. If you're wealthy, a scented glove rubbed across the neck might suffice. Or a change of linen. That's the real signal of civility. One 15th century manual claimed that changing your undershirt weekly had the same hygienic effect as bathing, which says a lot about both expectations and the power of delusion. And if someone smells too good, you watch them. Because here, in the heart of a living, breathing, wheezing medieval world, smelling too clean is practically criminal. And dirt, warm, familiar, blessed dirt, is a sign that you are safe, that you are known, that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. If there's one thing everyone agrees on in your village, it's this: water is untrustworthy. It's not just that the stream runs green half the year, or that the town well occasionally coughs up frogs. It's that water, especially moving water, seems to carry secrets, sinister ones. Every bad story begins with someone going too close to it, like the miller's cousin. She was seen kneeling at the creek, washing her legs, bare in full view of the geese, and worse, 3 adolescent boys who now speak only in whistles. A week later, she had chills, then boils, then a funeral with suspiciously quick seating arrangements. And the rumour, not that she caught something from the water, but that the water knew she was vulnerable and took her. In the local tavern, the older men still mutter that creeks are places where the old spirits linger, that devils ride the current on moonless nights, that every time you submerge your hands, you open yourself to whatever's under there. Whether that means leeches or temptation, no one clarifies. The result? People don't dip. They dab. A cloth to the face, a drizzle on the wrists. You don't immerse. You negotiate. Of course, there are exceptions. Rain is fine if it falls directly from the sky and isn't collected in anything shady, like a bucket that's also been used to pickle fish. Snow is also pure, assuming it hasn't landed on the thatched roof first, which could be teeming with bird droppings, mold, or things best left unnamed. But full body immersion? That's a rich person's gamble. Take nobles, for example. They can afford indoor tubs, giant barrels or wooden basins lined with linen. They fill them with warmed water, sometimes wine. They even add herbs, sage, rose petals, thyme. It sounds luxurious, romantic even, until you realize they almost never change. The water between family members. There's a real historical account from the 15th century describing a bath shared in this order. Father first, then eldest son, then the next son, down to the baby. By the end, the water was described as clouded with effort. The phrase still haunts you. And let's not forget what goes into water before it reaches the tub. In cities, streams often carried sewage alongside drinking supply. But even in small villages like yours, animals drink, urinate, and die in the same brook. You once watched a duck get eaten by something in the river. It was never seen again. Neither was your appetite that day. Bathing in such water is seen less as cleaning and more as courting disaster. It's not just the fear of disease, it's the optics. If you're willing to strip and soak in full view of the spirits, what else might you be willing to do? There was a man from a nearby hamlet, Gerald the Weaver, who insisted on bathing twice a week. He said it helped his joints and cleared his mind. People said it was unnatural. Eventually, someone reported him to the priest, who reminded Gerald that Satan was once the cleanest of all angels. The next day, Gerald was seen scrubbing his tub with a dead cat, which, oddly, no one questioned. All this might sound paranoid. And to a modern mind, one with hot water heaters, eucalyptus-scented body wash, and non-demonic plumbing, it is. But here, in your time, safety comes from familiarity. And there is nothing familiar about walking into water and walking out wet but clean. So you keep your hands dry and your linens dryish. You sit by the fire and let the smoke coat your skin in something earthy, and you tell yourself that sweat is nature's filter, not a symptom, because water remembers. And in this world, it's not what you wash off that kills you, it's what tries to climb in. The soapmaker's hut smells like something between a barn fire and last winter's stew. You catch whiffs of ash, fat, and the kind of sourness that suggests something once living was boiled until it stopped complaining. He's in the back, stirring a vat that bubbles like a witch's cauldron, but contains none of the glamour. You approach slowly, not because you're afraid of him, though you probably should be, but because you're trying not to breathe through your nose. "Ah," he says, not turning. "Come to smell beautiful, have you?" That's never what anyone comes for. Soap-making in your time is less about luxury and more about controlled rotting. The main ingredients: animal fat, wood ash, and thyme. That's it. 3 parts science, 1 part sorcery, and a healthy dollop of hoping the dog doesn't fall into the vat again. The fat usually comes from pigs, though he's not picky. Grease is grease, he shrugs, throwing a questionable lump into the pot. The ash, sifted from his hearth, high in lye content, strong enough to peel paint or skin. Stirred together and left to age, the mixture becomes hard, crumbly, and only slightly less offensive than the people it's meant to clean. But here's the thing. No one wants to use it. Not unless they absolutely have to. Soap is abrasive. It smells bad. It burns in places you'd rather not test. And it comes with a cost. Not just in coin, but in questions. Use too much of it, and people start talking. Ask for it by name, and someone might report you. Because using soap means you're concerned with appearances. And if you're concerned with appearances, you might be hiding something worse. Some say soap weakens the body's natural filth layer, a protective barrier believed to repel illness and evil alike. Others claim it stirs up humours, especially black bile, which everyone agrees is the worst one. A few whisper that it leaves you exposed to wandering spirits, since your skin, freshly scrubbed, smells too clean to blend in. And then there's the question of intent. The local herbalist once mentioned a story, half cautionary tale, half village scandal, about a woman who bought 2 cakes of soap within the same week. Not for her family, not even for her home, just for herself. Next thing you know, the cobbler's wife is mysteriously ill, and the soap woman's name is being scratched into the church pews with nails. Coincidence? Hard to say, but the soap maker sold less that month. Despite all this, the man keeps making it. He says it's honest work, though you suspect he enjoys the power. In a world where most people accept their smell as destiny, he holds the one thing that can change it, even if only temporarily. He shows you a batch he's experimenting with. Juniper ash, he says, and sheep marrow, for the ladies. It looks like wet clay and smells like burnt wool and pine tar. You ask how long it needs to cure. Oh, he chuckles, 3 weeks, or until the rats stop avoiding it. There are records. By the way, actual written accounts from apothecaries and housekeepers that mention soap made with goat bile, cacao, or mixed with and burnt snails, or aged with graveyard earth, for added cleansing power. No one knows if it worked, but the people who used it tended to be remembered, usually with adjectives like odd or briefly luminous. And there's still debate among historians about whether medieval people actually used the soap they made, or if it was more of a status item, kept in a chest, pulled out to impress guests, or passed down like jewelry. It's possible your soap maker hasn't used his own product in years, but he offers you a sliver anyway, wrapped in linen, with a look that dares you to try it. You take it carefully, like a relic or a warning, then tuck it away where it won't be seen, not because you're ashamed, but because clean things don't stay secret for long. Not out of illness, though there's plenty of that, but as a reflex, a warning, because once, not so long ago, public bathing was considered completely normal. In some cities, even fashionable. People brought snacks, instruments, friends. It was like a wellness retreat, minus the Instagram. Now, bathhouses are places you only speak of when you're sure no one pious is listening. Once upon a more optimistic century, the townsfolk would visit the stews, a term that originally referred to the heat and humidity, not what people did in them. A trip to the bath was a social event. Men and women bathed together. There were towels, perfumes, and sometimes even wine. Communal hygiene was in vogue. You'd sweat out the bad, scrub on the good, and go home cleaner in both body and spirit. But you know how it goes. Give humans warm water, and they'll invent at least 4 ways to get scandalous with it. Soon enough, those cheerful bathhouses became notorious. Some were fronts for prostitution. Others became centres for drunkenness, gambling, or worse. The spread of ideas. When people gather naked, apparently they start asking questions. By the 15th century, many towns cracked down hard. In London, a series of laws banned mixed-sex bathing. In Paris, entire bath districts were shut down and repurposed. In small villages like yours, bathhouses were either abandoned or quietly converted into grain storage. The structures remain. The steam does not. But people remember. An old man by the blacksmith still swears he met his wife in a bathhouse near Canterbury. Says her shoulders smelled like lavender and lye. His daughter covers his mouth whenever he starts that story. And while the bathhouses disappeared, the suspicion lingered. Even if someone today built a proper washhouse, with dividers and linen robes and separate hours for men and women, no one would go, because the bathhouse didn't just lose its purpose, it gained a reputation. There's a little-known court record from 1478 that mentions a widow in Bristol who reopened her late husband's bathhouse and tried to run it cleanly. No sex, no drink, just soap and heat. Within 2 weeks, she was accused of sowing corruption with her dampness. Her trial lasted 1 day. Her punishment was unclear. The bathhouse burned down within a month. Coincidence? Sure. But no one built another one. People began to believe that bathing, especially in public, invited sin, that heated water stirred the blood in unseemly ways. One cleric even warned that warmth without chastity is the devil's sponge. Whatever that meant, it stuck. In your village, there's still a building near the stream with stained stone benches and rusted pipes. Kids dare each other to peek inside. Locals call it the Devil's Lounge. No one bathes there, no one cleans it, and every time someone falls ill or gets pregnant unexpectedly or leaves the village under vague circumstances, someone always mutters, "Maybe they went bathing." Not as a joke, as an explanation, because once upon a time, to bathe was to seek comfort. Now, to bathe is to flirt with collapse. So you pass the old bathhouse on your way to the fields. Its windows are boarded, the vines cover most of the door, but you can still smell the faint memory of soapstone and heat when the wind blows just right. And for a moment, just a moment, you miss the idea of being clean, but not enough to try it. In your village, the human body is not trusted. Not because it sins, that's obvious, but because it leaks. And the skin, God's slightly disappointing wrapper, was believed to be full of tiny holes. Openings, gateways, to all sorts of trouble. A friendly monk once explained it like this: your skin is like cheesecloth, and if you heat it, say with a warm bath, it opens right up, letting things in that it should never be allowed entry. Not just air or vapours, but evil, corruption. Invisible devils, he called them, that slip through your pores when your limbs are loose with warmth. You believed him, mostly because he had one blue eye and one grey, and people said that was a mark of divine insight, or a poorly healed injury. Either way, he said it with such confidence you didn't question him. The idea of skin holes isn't unique to your monk. It shows up again and again in medieval medical texts. The Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum, a wildly popular health manual of the time, warned that bathing too often draws humours toward the surface, weakening the body's natural defences. If humours are unfamiliar to you, imagine your body as a very moody soup made of 4 ingredients: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Health meant keeping them in balance. Bathing, especially hot bathing, was believed to scramble the recipe. So, the smarter choice? Don't open your skin. Don't tempt the invisible. There are exceptions, of course. Pilgrims are allowed to bathe once before leaving for holy sites. Knights once before battle. Brides occasionally, the night before a wedding. But only if supervised. A girl from a neighbouring town once bathed privately before her wedding and was struck with nosebleeds for a fortnight. The midwife called it punishment for bathing while impure. Her husband never kissed her again. There are ongoing arguments among scholars today about just how widespread these beliefs were. Some records show town officials installing bathhouses and physicians prescribing soaks in herbal broths. Others show clergy condemning baths as invitations to lust. The truth is, both existed side by side, one in the daylight of theory, the other in the shadows of daily life. Here's a less-known detail. Some people tried to cheat the rules. Instead of full bathing, they boiled herbs and inhaled the steam, or soaked their feet and claimed it didn't count. One noblewoman in Prague is rumoured to have hired a servant to bathe in her place, sitting beside the tub to absorb the vapour indirectly. You're not sure how that worked, but she lived to 87, so maybe she was onto something. A neighbour once told you about a man who moved in from the coast, had strange habits, washed his face every morning with cold river water, used a cloth, not just his hands, kept his fingernails neat. Within 2 months, someone started the rumour that his eyes gleamed too much and his goat miscarried. By the 3rd month, he was gone. Again, probably coincidence. Still, you tuck these things away like seeds. Stories that grow in your mind whenever your hands start to feel too oily, when the itch between your shoulder blades becomes unbearable, when you stare at the wash basin and wonder how much evil water can actually carry. So instead of bathing, you rub your skin with cloth. You brush your hair with fingers. You let the air dry the sweat and the wind lift the stink. You cover the rest with linen, rosemary sachets, and denial. And you remind yourself, it's not about being clean. It's about keeping things sealed. Because an open body is a vulnerable one. And in this village, vulnerability invites far more than disease. It invites questions. You don't get visitors often, which is why the arrival of a travelling physician causes such a stir. Not a real doctor, probably, just someone who's seen enough people die to feel confident offering advice on how not to. He wears layers of dark wool despite the heat, a wide-brimmed hat, and carries a leather satchel that smells faintly of vinegar, dried herbs, and regret. He sets up shop in the churchyard. Not in the church. He's not that holy, but close enough to borrow some of its credibility. People approach with everything from boils to back pain. He charges 1 egg or 2 if you make eye contact. You go with the others. Not because you're ill, but because curiosity is stronger than sense. He speaks in Latin when he wants to sound wise, in French when he wants to sound expensive, and in a loud nasal English when he wants to be feared. He explains that many ailments are caused by vapours, not the kind from stew pots or chimney smoke, but the invisible floating kind, the ones that travel through dampness, especially the moist air around baths. He describes water as a wicked medium. It agitates the bile, wakens lust, and worst of all, summons the foul humours from the feet to the brain. He uses phrases like interior rot and poor betrayal. No one really knows what he means. But when he takes out a large illustrated manuscript, cracked with use and smeared with thumb grease, you all lean in. The images are crude. A man with steam rising from his back. Another with black veins. A woman whose face is sliding off like butter. This is what happens, he says, when you open your skin in hot water without prayer. No one laughs, not even the children. He goes on to prescribe more sensible alternatives. Vinegar-soaked cloths applied behind the knees and under the arms. Sage poultices. Powdered pumice rubbed into the skin with a stiff brush. And, of course, fumigation chambers, which it turns out are just barrels you sit in while someone burns herbs around you. You ask him, quietly, if bathing ever helps. He squints, as if you've spoken a forbidden word. Then, with a half smile, only the dead have clean bones. That shuts down the conversation nicely. Historians debate the role of figures like this. Some were snake oil salesmen. Others truly believed in their leech jars and dried toad powders. A few even kept journals, scratched out barely legible accounts of what they saw and who they tried to save. One such journal from the 1390s includes a recipe for preventing bathing sickness. drink a cup of wine with a silver coin in it, recite Psalm 51 and spit once into the hearth. It's unclear whether that helped. The handwriting stops halfway through a sentence. As the physician packs up, you hear someone ask about the town up north, the one with the warm springs. They say people there bathe regularly and live longer. He mutters something about devil water and keeps walking. Later that evening, a small line forms outside his lodging. Not for medicine, but for questions. Quiet ones. Questions like, what if I have bathed recently? What if I liked it? What if I boiled a cloth and used it gently? What if I didn't pray after? He listens, nods, prescribes stronger vinegar, then closes the shutters for the night. And just like that, a village full of people once again decides that itching is safer than answers. Cleanliness, as it turns out, is a matter of strategy, not soap. In your village, you don't take baths, but you do change your underclothes. Religiously, in fact. And if that sounds sanitary to modern ears, wait until you see what counts as a wash day. Every 7 to 10 days, or 12 if the cows are calving, you peel off your linen underthings, chemise, shirt or braise, and boil them in a cauldron filled with lye water and regret. Not soap, just water passed through ashes until it burns like old wine down your throat. You boil until the linen turns from grey to off-grey. Then you rinse it in the river, lay it on the hedgerows, and pray the chickens don't sit on it. Then you put it back on. That's it. That's washing. Because the skin may be sacred, but linen is a shield. Medieval manuals even describe it that way. One 14th century housebook reads, "The clean shirt wards off decay from the flesh and keeps the humours balanced." It doesn't matter that you haven't bathed in weeks. If your linen's freshish, you're a respectable member of society, and heaven help the person who skips it. There's a story retold by washerwomen in at least 4 villages about a nobleman who wore the same chemise for 40 days and nights. When they removed it, using tongs, the cloth tore at the seams, not from wear, but because it had fused to his skin. The smell was so bad, the dog ran away and joined a monastery. Probably apocryphal. But the message is clear. Linen, Chukshas hygiene. Bath, Chukshas heresy. And it's not just shirts. Hair, too, follows a logic all its own. You don't wash it, you dress it. You brush, plait, and powder. You pin sprigs of lavender in your braids or rub in ground rosemary to cover the oil. You dust your scalp with flour, sometimes chalk, if you're lucky enough to find some. A handful of people have tried using fermented barley rinse. Beer, essentially, but it's controversial, mostly because it smells like a tavern threw up on your head. And yet, it works. Sort of. In your home, cleaning is a ritual of substitution. Vinegar replaces soap. Friction replaces water. Scent replaces shame. You keep little bundles of herbs in your sleeves. Small pillows of mint, marjoram, and dried orange peel. They don't stop the stink. Nothing stops it. But they compete with it. And that's what matters. One merchant's daughter you once met carried slices of apple soaked in rosewater in her corset. She'd chew one every few hours and then rub her hands with the other. She called it a fragrance loop. She also had no friends. But she smelled incredible. And then there's the most important method of staying clean. Judgment. You watch others. You sniff the air near them. You evaluate how they've tied their hair, how grey their cuffs are, how many lice they're scratching through with a fork. and you build your confidence not on your own hygiene, but on being slightly cleaner than the next person. It's a social game, one with real consequences. There are known cases, written down no less, of marriages being annulled on account of excessive stink. A noblewoman in Burgundy once took her dowry and left her husband, citing his dark moistures. The priest sided with her. The man was offered absolution. If he agreed to fumigate monthly, he declined. So, no, you don't bathe, not in water. But you boil your linens, scrub your scalp, beat your rug with a stick, and toss bundles of thyme in your fireplace. You survive with cleverness and cloth. And when someone asks if you've washed recently, you answer, "Of course." Then quickly change the subject. They say the Reeve's wife took a bath. Not a cloth-rubbed rinse, not a vinegar dab behind the ears. A real bath. Full immersion. In warm water. Alone. You'd think she'd summoned a demon. It started with a glimpse. Her hair, damp and uncovered, hanging loose as she stood by her door, combing with a shell. That alone might have gone unnoticed, except her skin looked different, lighter, fresher. Someone said it gleamed, which in this town is not a compliment, but a red flag. By evening, the gossip had fermented like cider left in the sun. They whispered she had soaked in rainwater collected in a barrel. Others said she'd boiled rosemary and added milk. Someone even claimed she'd used rose oil, which hasn't been seen around here since the last fair, when a travelling peddler sold perfume and caught scabies. That peddler is still referred to as the scented curse. The next day, the Reeve's wife went to market, and that's when the storm broke. Eyes followed her. Women stood back. Someone coughed very deliberately near the carrots, and when she leaned forward to inspect a goose, the butcher stepped away, citing an urgent need to salt his ladle. She hadn't just bathed, she'd broadcast it. In a world where modest dirt is a virtue and musk is a form of self-defense, her cleanliness wasn't purity. It was pride, or seduction, or sickness. The parish priest noticed too. That Sunday he altered his sermon. Nothing direct. Just a long meandering meditation on the dangers of vanity, the slippery slope of scented oils, and the devil's fondness for warm water. He ended with a line about the freshly washed lamb being most appetizing to wolves. Everyone looked at her. She didn't come the next week. And soon the stories evolved. Her skin wasn't just too clean, it was pale as bone. Someone swore she no longer cast a shadow. Another claimed to see steam rising off her feet in church. There was talk of the devil's bathmaid, a figure from a travelling minstrel's tale, a woman who boiled herself nightly to stay young and drank the bathwater before dawn. All of this from one wash. Historians might scoff. But these stories are documented, buried in local records, scribbled in margins, passed down in herbalist scrolls. One 15th century parish ledger contains a note next to a woman's name. Took to soaking, grew odd, vanished. Nothing more. There's debate about how often these suspicions led to punishment. Not all clean people were cast out, but they were remembered, uncomfortably. And remembered in a village is halfway to accused. Days pass. The Reeve's wife stops appearing in public. Her window shutters stay drawn. Someone says her husband has moved to the grain loft. Another swears they saw her throwing lemon peels into her fire, an unmistakable sign of foreign corruption. You walk past her cottage and wonder, did she simply want to feel fresh? Or was it something more? A quiet rebellion? a moment of luxury stolen from the grip of a muddy life. Either way, she broke a rule. The rule that says, to be acceptable is to be dull. To be safe is to be stained. To bathe is to declare you don't fear the water. And that, more than anything, is what truly frightens them. It's strange how often scent is mistaken for virtue. In your village, no one really expects you to smell good, just not wrong. The trick is to hit a sweet spot between pleasantly herbal and not actively rotting. Think of it like a medieval deodorant ad, if the slogan were passably alive. So you dab vinegar behind your ears. Not just any vinegar, of course. You've steeped it with dried mint and marigold petals, crushed between warm stones. It's strong, sharper than wine, almost medicinal. A scent that says, "I'm not dead yet, thank you." You let it dry on your neck like a second skin, not because you think it helps, but because everyone else does. Fragrance here isn't about attraction, it's camouflage. A way to mask not just odour, but suspicion. The nobles know this well. Visit the manor house and you'll find lavender stuffed into cushions, juniper hung from beams, and oranges pierced with cloves, sitting in bowls like tiny armoured planets. The baron's daughter wears a pomander, a metal orb dangling from her girdle, filled with powdered cinnamon, clove, and the illusion of health. She smells like expensive denial. And that's the point. In high society, fragrance is armour. It signals wealth, piety, and distance from manual labour. One whiff of crushed violets, and everyone forgets you haven't bathed since Candlemas. There's even a theory, half medicine, half magic, that certain smells ward off disease. This isn't just folk belief, it's endorsed by scholars. According to medieval medical logic, bad smells attract bad air, and good smells push it away. They call it miasma theory. The idea that disease travels through stench, like gossip through a closed door. So naturally, people fight stench with stench. There's a documented recipe from the 1400s for a plague prevention fragrance. Wine vinegar steeped with sage, rue, wormwood, camphor, cloves, and, bizarrely, ground unicorn horn. Spoiler, it was probably just powdered deer antler. But still, people paid good money for it. Sprinkled it on their clothes, rubbed it on their children's foreheads, sprayed it on dead bodies, and for a brief moment, believed. Of course, not everyone can afford imported spices or imaginary animals. The rest of the village makes do. Old Ulrich, the thatcher, ties garlic to his belt and calls it his wife repellent. The brewer's apprentice soaks rags in rosehip and stuffs them in his boots. And the baker's boy chews fennel seeds until his jaw aches, just to keep the priest from glaring during confession. None of it works exactly, but then again, neither does bathing. You've started your own routine, crushed rosemary in your sleeves, a bit of dried sage tucked into your bonnet. Once, during a feast, you rubbed your hands with parsley until they stank like stew. Someone complimented you, said you smelled holy. You took it as a win. What's fascinating, alarming really, is how quickly smell becomes social hierarchy. A sweet scent says you're clean even if you aren't. A sour one says you're suspicious even if you're devout. The wrong smell at the wrong time in the wrong company can undo your reputation faster than gossip. It's said that Queen Elizabeth Farfetz, who bathed rarely, if at all, was so committed to smelling acceptable that she owned dozens of perfumed gloves, laced with ambergris and rose oil. Her courtiers followed suit, some going so far as to stuff dried herbs under their wigs to ward off both lice and judgment. One baron, according to court letters, wore a perfumed codpiece filled with musk. It didn't make him popular, but it did make him memorable. So you sniff yourself cautiously before bed. You smell like vinegar and thyme. Not sweet, not sickly, just safe. And in a world where baths are suspicious and soap is borderline slander, safety smells like herbs and effort. There's a strange power in pretending you've bathed. Some people get really good at it. It's an art form, really. Cosmetic deception in the age of chamber pots and composting floors. You know their tricks, mostly because you've started adopting them yourself. First, the hair. No one washes it, not with water. Instead, there's dusting, a mixture of ground rice, chalk, and rosemary ash. Lightly patted into the scalp and brushed out with a stiff, bristled comb. It leaves a faint greyish hue, more powdered wig than shampoo commercial, but it smells vaguely medicinal, and that's what counts. A bit of sage under the hood completes the illusion. If someone leans close and sniffs, all they'll smell is something herbal, not the week-old soup steam still clinging to your collar. Your teeth? Tooth powder is a thing. Mostly a gritty mix of crushed mint leaves, ashes, salt, and charcoal. You rub it on with a linen cloth, not a brush. It doesn't whiten. It just resets the mouth's worst offences. And if that fails, chewing fennel seeds like a cow with opinions usually does the trick. Your skin? You scrape it. Gently, with a blunt knife, bone shard, or even seashell. The wealthy call it exfoliation. You call it not smelling like fish. After scraping, you might oil yourself with a mix of lard and lavender. Yes, really. In winter, that oil might freeze. In summer, it melts into your shirt. Either way, you shine. Not clean, just glossy, like a well-polished ham. There's a boy in the village, Tom, the Reeves' nephew, who took this to theatrical levels. He found chalk, powdered it, and used it to pale his cheeks before feast days. Wore rosewater like armour. Practiced smiling in reflective spoons. People called him the Bishop's Mirror. Girls giggled, boys scowled. The priest stared too long during Mass. Eventually, he was told to stop, because to look clean is one thing. To look too clean is an invitation for questions. That's the double bind here. People say they want cleanliness, but only if it's accidental. Natural, effortless. Like you just happen to be born immune to dirt, sweat, and spiritual infection. If you try to be clean, you must be hiding something. There are surviving texts, devotional handbooks mostly, that warn against vanities of surface. One even cautions against polished shoes, saying, "Let not thy feet outshine thy soul, lest both walk into ruin." Another favourite, clean hands may hide a filthy conscience, which is rich, coming from men who haven't washed their hands since Pentecost. One woman, Lady Margaret of Dorset, went even further. She powdered her face white with a mixture of chalk and crushed eggshells. Then applied a glaze made of honey and powdered gold leaf. The bees liked her. No one else did. Her portraits survive, stiff and glowing, though historians can't agree whether her beauty was admired or weaponized. Some call her an innovator. Others just call her crunchy. In your own modest way, you fake freshness like a pro. On market days, you pin a laurel leaf behind your ear. You chew parsley before speaking to elders. You dab vinegar on your fingertips so that if anyone smells your hands, they'll think you've been cleaning something, anything. It's all about optics. About suggesting the idea of bathing without ever making the mistake of actually doing it. And you realize something sobering. In your world, cleanliness isn't just health, it's performance. A curated identity, a role you play, a scent trail you manage like a map of safe passage. One wrong whiff and you're suddenly an outcast, or worse, a spectacle. But if you do it right, you'll pass, you'll be accepted, admired even, because the cleanest people in town never touched a drop of water. There's a woman in the hills named Elder. People call her a healer, never a witch, at least not to her face. But when you visit her, you're not allowed to ask for soap. You must say, "Help me shed the filth," or "Show me how to cleanse what clings." Words matter up here. Elder's hut smells like dried thyme, bone dust, and boiled nettle. She hangs plants from the rafters, talks to her goat, and spits in her fire before answering serious questions. She doesn't bathe, but her skin has the quiet sheen of someone who knows how to use mud with intention. She doesn't clean you, she unburdens you. When you ask her about bathing, she laughs so hard she wheezes. "You mean stew yourself like meat?" "No thanks." Then, more seriously, water's for drinking and dying in. You want to be clean? Start with your shadow. Still, she has methods. Elder mixes ashes with herbs, heats them over embers, and presses the smoke into her skin with a cloth. She says it tricks the air into thinking you've been reborn. Once she offered you a strange potion. Burnt onion skins, crushed shells, vinegar, and rabbit blood. "Not to drink," she warned, "just to carry. It keeps bad smells away, and worse people." Some villagers swear she once rubbed herself down with honey and thistle, then rolled in clean straw, then let bees swarm her, not to sting, but to bless. One boy tried it. He got stung 47 times and now walks with a limp. Elder says that's because he didn't ask the bees first. You don't question her logic. She has scrolls tucked behind baskets. Old ones. Some in Latin, others in spidery script that might predate even the nearby abbey. She claims one was written by a nun who secretly bathed in moonlight and died glowing. You'd laugh, but there's a part of you that wants it to be true. Elder teaches by gesture. She rubs juniper oil into her wrists, not because it works, but because it feels like it should. That's her real wisdom. Perception over proof. If you smell clean, walk clean. Carry yourself like someone who isn't rotting inside. People will believe you. Cleanliness, she says, is not about scrubbing. It's about reminding people you're not dangerous. She tells you of a town far to the east where women wash once a month in salt and goat milk. It's a secret rite, only done in cellars, with the doors barred and a broom propped against the wall upside down to confuse spirits. They sing while they do it, not hymns, but riddles. She says the singing keeps the soap from going sour. You ask if that's real. She shrugs. "Is this?" she asks, gesturing to the fire, the roof, the dirt under your fingernails. Elder herself carries no scent but wood smoke. She says she uses her own sweat to predict the weather. If it smells sweet, expect frost. You're not sure if that's science or lunacy, but then again, No one's gotten sick under her care in years. When you leave, she gives you a satchel of something crumbling and bitter-smelling. Don't eat it, she says. Just burn it if you're ever too clean for your own good. You nod, unsure whether it's a warning or a blessing. The further you walk from her hut, the more the village returns. Mud underfoot, flies hovering, the comforting stink of cows and people and living things that refuse to apologize. And you start to understand, pour muddy clean isn't the absence of dirt, it's the presence of control, or illusion, or both. And maybe that's enough. There's a lull in the fields, and when the day is quiet like this, people gossip, loudly, publicly, as if the sun might forgive them for saying things they wouldn't whisper at night. Today they're talking about Brother Arnulf, a monk maybe, or once a monk. He arrived last week, all robes and mumbling, clutching a copy of Physica Jump by Hildegard of Bingen, like it was his last connection to sanity. He sleeps in the stable behind the tavern and spends his days warning anyone who'll listen about the dangers of warm water. He has a face like a cracked bowl and eyes that blink out of sync. You can't tell if he's wise or just overboiled by solitude. Bathing, he says, invites pride. Pride invites Satan. Satan invites decay of the marrow. He tells this to a group of children trying to eat blackberries. One of them cries. Arnulf used to be a copyist, apparently. His hands still bear ink stains beneath the grime. But at some point, no one knows when, he became obsessed with the idea that God never intended for humans to be spotless, that the body unwashed is a form of reverence, a holy offering. Even saints reeked, he insists. Why should you not? He's not wrong. Some saints were famously filthy. St. Cuthbert refused to bathe for decades. St. Francis embraced lepers. St. Simeon Stylites lived on a pillar for 37 years and let his foot rot so badly it fused to the wood. Pilgrims lined up to see it. Holiness has a smell, and it's not rosewater. Arnulf offers spiritual cleansing instead. Not confession. Something newer. Stranger. He gives people scrolls of psalms soaked in vinegar, meant to be worn under the armpits for purification. He insists that bathing is unnecessary if you sleep with garlic cloves under your tongue and say Kyrie eleison with every exhale. The baker tried it. His breath is now both sanctified and terrifying. There are records of men like Arnulf, semi-hermits, eccentrics, God's stinkers, as some chroniclers cruelly called them. They wander from town to town during hard seasons, preaching a theology of sacred filth. One such figure reportedly claimed that angels could not recognize freshly bathed souls. They pass over the sweet-smelling, he warned, for fear of mistaking them for devils. Whether Arnulf believes all this or simply enjoys the attention, no one's sure. But he's gaining followers. Not disciples exactly, but sympathizers. People who were already wary of washing now quote him as if he's scripture. Someone's even carved water lies into the old millstone. The irony, of course, is that Arnulf still wipes his hands obsessively on his robe, still combs his beard, still avoids the latrine pit, and insists on relieving himself behind a certain bush. Even he has boundaries. But it's the idea that spreads, that bathing is suspicious not because it's sinful, but because it suggests you don't trust Ertos, that you're trying to reject the very fabric of mortality. And who does that? Alchemists, heretics, the French. You catch Arnulf once at sunset, kneeling by the stream, staring into the water like it insulted him personally. He doesn't touch it, just watches, then mutters, "False mirror," and walks away. You think about that a long time, because in a world where your reflection only appears in puddles and polished goblets, maybe water really does show something dangerous, something you're not meant to see, a version of yourself that believes you're entitled to comfort, to clarity, to being clean. And that version wouldn't last a week here. The sky darkens early tonight, and with it comes the soft crackle of home fires, the lowing of tired cattle, and the subtle shifting of people preparing for evening without admitting that anything's ending. You sit with a group around a shared loaf, and someone brings up the Kebbu Bishop's Edict. It's not new, just recently were reposted, read aloud from the pulpit with theatrical coughs. It declares once again that bathing should only be undertaken for medical reasons and only under the guidance of a physician or monk. No recreational immersion, no perfumed oils, no naked soaking, even for the purposes of spiritual renewal. The edict comes with a list of approved alternatives: rubbing with vinegar-soaked linen, smoke fumigation, with a supervising elder, and for noble women, sitting over hot herbs while reciting selected psalms. One man, half drunk, mumbles that his wife once misread the instructions and steamed herself over hanthaim and leeks. He claims her skin smelled like soup for a week. The laughter that follows is cautious, because the truth is, everyone's trying something. Quietly, in corners, in borrowed buckets. One girl swears by snow rubs. A man you know sneaks to the river and dunks his feet after sundown. The midwife washes her elbows with a wet cloth dipped in diluted wine. For the spirits, she claims. But no one talks openly. Even the cleanest people pretend they aren't. That's the part historians sometimes miss when they write about medieval bathing. They assume it vanished, that people just gave up on water and surrendered to the mud. But in the spaces between records, in the margins of manuscripts, in the notes of travelling monks, you find whispers, small rebellions. A nobleman in Prague is said to have commissioned a secret bath built beneath his stables, masked by hay and perfume. A widow in Toulouse washed her feet nightly in warmed milk and covered them with basil leaves, lest she forget her humanity. And in one strange letter from a Flemish merchant, he describes attending a cleansing dinner, where guests dined in shifts while servants bathed them one limb at a time between courses. Yes, it's absurd, but it's real, and it shows something you've felt all day. People didn't stop bathing because they wanted to. They stopped because the world decided it meant too much. To be clean became suspicious because it implied you thought you were better, purer, more deserving. And in a society obsessed with humility and hierarchy, nothing is more dangerous than aspiration. So now, at night, you clean yourself in pieces. One hand, then the other. A cloth behind your ears. A rinse of your teeth with sour wine. No full immersion, no warm water. Just partial comforts, doled out like contraband. You watch the others do the same, all of you silently preserving your health, your dignity, your tiny vanities, one hidden routine at a time. And no one says a word, because it's better to be thought lazy than arrogant, better to itch than invite judgment, better to rot quietly than shine too brightly in the dark. Still, as you lay down on your straw tonight, limbs sore and linen damp from vinegar rubs, you wonder briefly what it would feel like to step into warm water, to lower yourself completely, to wash, not because you're guilty, but because you're human. And the thought is dangerous, but it's beautiful too. The night is still, and the stars blink like shy eyes over the thatched rooftops. Somewhere a dog groans in its sleep. You lie awake longer than usual, listening to your breath and wondering what clings to you that you cannot see. You think again of the river, not the one near the village, the one the livestock wade into, the one everyone avoids after a flood, but the older river, the one further out, past the stone arch and behind the ruins where moss grows like velvet on broken altar stones. They say a woman once bathed there every solstice, naked as the moon. Not a witch, exactly, but not a witch. When she stopped coming, the plants near the bank withered, and the water turned sluggish for a decade. No one ever proved the stories, but no one bathes there now either. The memory of it glows in your mind like a secret coin. Warm, heavy, not meant to be spent. You've gone this entire day, as always, without touching water beyond your fingertips. You smell faintly of vinegar and smoke, and something metallic that might be your own skin, slowly turning back into earth. And yet, for a moment, you feel clean. Not in the way saints write about, but in the way only people like you understand. Clean because you have survived, because your filth has not betrayed you, because you've worn your scent like armor and passed, once more, through judgment unscathed. Outside, the moonlight touches the shutters, soft, indifferent, eternal, and you think, maybe you'll try just a little cloth bath tomorrow. No one has to know. Just warm the water slightly, rub your shoulders, hum a tune you don't remember learning. Call it prayer, call it maintenance, call it remembering what comfort once felt like. Because in a world where bathing is dangerous, forbidden, or shameful, wanting to be clean is the most radical act of all. The fire dwindles, the air cools. You shift under the wool and straw, and the world feels softer, quieter. You made it through the day. You didn't bathe. And maybe, somehow, you still feel a little whole. Let that be enough for now.